I've been making videos for a long time now, and I think one of my favorite types of videos to work on are the weird character videos, where I basically give my opinion on a character and playing them in a casual setting. It's nothing much, but it's always been fun, minus one exception. Since these videos are pretty old and show fighting during its more older days, I decided to compile every single video of this series thus far that I consider official in this long supercut of sorts. Even if some of the videos like the Biograft and Skateboard ones are videos I really don't like looking back. With that being said, enjoy the collection of this series. Hyperlaser has been a character I wanted to try many times, but ultimately failed a lot. Months later, I decided to revisit Hyperlaser after he got a few changes and such to his kit and whatnot. After playing a lot of games with him, I wanted to talk about Hyperlaser, what I liked and disliked about him as a character, and overall if I want to continue playing him or not. With that said, let's do a small overview on Hyperlaser and his moves first. Hyperlaser has 75 HP and 100 shield, making him seem too bulky for a ranged fighter, but we'll talk about that later. His moveset is also absolutely amazing, as his passive, Locked and Loaded, allows Hyperlaser to hit headshots, which doubles the damage of his M1 Hyper Ray. By hitting heads, Hyperlaser could go from 20 damage on a body shot to a whopping 40 damage on a headshot, allowing for crazy damage potential. His M2, Pierce Ray, is great for doing good burst damage thanks to the 2 rays that pop out and the fact they could go through boombox shields, which makes it very threatening to face against. Hyperlaser's Q, Voltaic Grenade, works as a mobility tool for allies and yourself, or works as a way to get enemies off of you or wireframe them. Wireframe is a state in which you can move freely but cannot use any attacks. It's like stun, but you can actually move. If you land a Q directly, it does 30 damage and causes an explosion effect. However, hitting this direct Q is a pain to do from long ranges. Hyperlaser's E, Voltaic Shift, allows him to go to many different spots on the map. He winds up and then teleports to whatever you're pointing at from a limited range. Getting hit, however, causes an explosion around you and cancels the teleport, which is good for getting close range attackers off of you even further, and makes your next shot instant. However, the ability only teleports you onto flat grounds, which makes it very limited on spots you can get to, but some spots on large open maps and conquer maps are amazing with this skill. Finally, Hyperlaser's finisher is Eviscerating Ray, which fires a shot after a long windup that can one-shot anything. If you hit the shot, you get to fire another shot until you fired a total of 3 shots or you missed one of them. Also, hitting a boombox shield gives you another free shot, so don't worry if you accidentally hit that, especially after the long windup and the loud as hell sound it emits. Okay, after going through all of that kit nonsense, let's go into what I like about Hyperlaser. Now, obviously, Hyperlaser's kit is fantastic for long range. Being able to hit 40 damage headshots thanks to his passive is amazing and has some of the highest damage output in the game. His M2 also gives high burst damage and is able to secure kills even due to the second ray it fires. His Q arc is also pretty generous, as the grenade can just fly through the air and onto faraway opponents, allowing you to wireframe anyone from almost anywhere. And while I never cared for the speed boost on allies, I found myself using the speed boost for my escape from people, since Hyperlaser is naturally a slow fighter to play as. His E was also very nice to use for mobility, as it allowed me to switch my positions and get on the conquer point when the time was almost up, hopefully helping to secure a win or go into overtime because of it. The instant shot is also cool, but I almost always miss it because I panic every time. As for using it against close range enemies, I was only able to use it against some skate player trying to kill me on SFOF and knocked them off, which led him to be mad, and I don't have footage of it unfortunately. As for Hyperlaser's finisher, I cannot land all 3 shots almost at all. I can land 1 or 2 at times, but the max free just never happens, as I usually try to hard read people or just be slightly off in my aim. However, I love the dopamine boost I get when I hit a shot after that loud wind up. It makes me feel so awesome right after. Also, this is more of a map thing, but on big open maps, Hyperlaser feels somewhat relaxing to play at times. You basically get to a high point of the map and start sniping and picking off people one by one. You basically get to do whatever you want outside the action, and it makes you a huge asset to your team, a powerful one at that. Alright, now that we got those simple things out of the way, let's go straight into the things I disliked about playing Hyperlaser. So far, all of these things sound fun, and Hyperlaser sounds incredible on paper, since he could simply position himself away and run when he's being closed in on. Oh, if it was that simple, because he has some problems I encounter. All of his M1 shots have a slight cooldown to them when fired, which means you have to either track your opponent a bit, or be some flick god that plays shooter games a lot. Since I cannot flick, I usually track, which means I miss a good amount of my shots either because my sensitivity was a bit too high, or simply just can't aim at anyone. This is a huge problem for every Hyperlaser because it's not as simple as using rocket splash damage as a crutch, or a hit scan projectile like Slingshot, or a very fast projectile like Shuriken. You are forced to get used to the cooldown to be even of use to the team. Hyperlaser also feels incredibly sluggish to play as well, since doing a shot halts any momentum you ever had. This is fine for aiming shots better, but when you need to move out of the way, the slow lasts for so long that you practically have no time to react to anything coming your way because the game just won't let you. Now, all of these sound bad, but surely Hyperlaser won't have more problems that are linked specifically because of the nature of the game, right? Right? God damn it just keeps on happening, doesn't it? If someone closes in on you, you will almost always fail. While Hyperlaser can win almost every matchup from a long range, any fighter that can close in on Hyperlaser will almost always shred him to pieces. Yeah, some fighters can't catch up due to limited damage output like Subspace, or simply unable to catch him like Katana, but the majority like Shuriken and Biograft outright win almost every time against Hyperlaser. Unless the person playing is constantly messing up or the Hyperlaser somehow outplays the counter, you are almost always in a losing state and practically become unable to play Hyperlaser's main traits at all. It gets better when you realize that if you stay to fight the counter, trying to shoot slows you to a crawl, which makes you so much easier to hit in every conceivable way. Even other Hyperlaser finishers can hit you in the span of time with its stupid as hell hitbox. Now, you could also run the teammates, but that'll not only make you get targeted more, but those areas where your teammates are at usually have more enemies that could body you. So, just don't get targeted then, right? If only it was simple. From playing Hyperlaser, there is a high chance you'll get targeted because you do high damage, or you're an easy kill to add to annihilate scores because you cannot kill that one random Biograft who loves using Q on you, or the Slingshot who double jumps all the time to throw your aim off, or that Shuriken just buddy hops for his life against you. I cannot stress how bad targeting feels in this game. It fills me up with so much rage that it kills me on the inside as to why I play this damned character. And you know what? That's why Hyperlaser is such a weird fighter to play. So good, yet so easy to play around as you do high outputs of damage, yet one rushdown by a Biograft can spell the end for you. I could have games where I land a lot of shots and stay safe away from all the enemies, in games where I am struggling to land any shots and have a slingshot tracking me down with some invisible radar. He is simply a fighter that can't be too good at all, but yet can't be too bad. It's balanced by an extreme positive and negative of the fighter that you cannot change unless you rework his entire kit. Will I still continue to play Hyperlaser and try to make my tracking even better, however? You know what? Hell yeah! When I actually get to play the game, Hyperlaser is fun as hell, and hitting shots gives me a complete wave of joy. On the other hand, getting targeted constantly for trying to play the game is annoying and infuriating at times. And missing shots that could even cost a game is a hard feeling to take in every time. Sometimes going through pain is a part of a fighter you have to take, unfortunately. Honestly, Hyperlaser has been one hell of an experience compared to any other fighter I tried thus far. That's why I think Hyperlaser is a very odd character in fighting. Thanks for watching. Biograft is a character that I never really played at all, and a character that I sometimes forget about when trying to play the game. Maybe because Biograft is one of two characters that I absolutely despised playing, but I wouldn't remember. After playing a lot of games with him, I wanted to talk about Biograft, what I liked and disliked him about him as a character, and overall if I want to continue playing him or not. With that said, let's do a small overview on Biograft and his moves first. Biograft is the definition of a glass cannon in every way. Biograft has 50 HP and 75 shield, which combines for the lowest survivability stats wise. However, Biograft has high damage options at his disposal. His M1 does fast close range damage with his energy blades, but due to his passive, which is conveniently called Power of Biograft, he has a heat meter to watch out for. If you overfill the meter at the bottom, your M1 gets disabled for a bit, an explosion happens around you that damages you and nearby enemies. This can be used to finish enemies, but it's so much better to simply control your swings. His M2 Slash Storm is absolutely incredible, and he launches an X-shaped projectile. After it travels a certain distance or hits terrain like a wall, it has a hitbox that can do upwards of 40 damage if an enemy stays in it. This is incredible for not only finishing enemies or running away, but absolutely amazing with Biograft's Q. Biograft's Q, Echo Execution, is a fast projectile with a bit of a windup that does 10 damage and adds some sort of aim reticle on the target. Pressing Q in this window of time teleports you to the person and does another 10 damage. However, if you do it when they are under 25% of their max health, it immediately auto kills them. Biograft's E, Blink, literally blinks Biograft forward, damaging anyone for 15 damage. If Biograft hits someone, it immediately recasts and Biograft can do it again for a maximum of 3 times, which could theoretically do 45 damage to one person. Biograft can also use this for mobility to get to higher places on a map or to escape danger. Biograft's finisher is Overdrive, which makes Biograft slash 50% faster, ignore the heat meter, and give 15 shield to Biograft with every kill. However, Biograft's HP and shield drains fast when in this state, which can make him completely prone to being shut down. Using his finisher again while in this state causes an explosion that does more damage depending on how much health you have, doing a max of 50 damage. This makes his finisher really hard to use and makes it a high risk, high reward finisher. Now, if Biograft's entire kit sounds like a glass cannon, then you'd be absolutely right. I love playing glass cannon characters in any game that has an option of them, as it makes you give incredible offensive power while also making you prone to that same damage. This type of archetype in games exists everywhere, and Biograft is basically that except in fighting. Being able to use all these abilities with each other make Biograft such a unique character to play as, since no character really involves all of their abilities like this in such a short burst of time, which made it incredibly refreshing to play. And since all of these abilities do tons of damage, you can usually chain together very well, like using your E on someone and then trying to hit an M2, or Q on the enemy to take them down. It's a little weird to explain, but you kinda get the idea here. And since he is a glass cannon, he has the mobility needed to be fun to play as. Not only that, Biograft is very satisfying to play as. Hitting a multi-skill combo on someone just feels so good because you feel skilled doing it, which playing as Biograft is a good feeling since he does require skill to play well. Especially when using his finisher, you have to think quickly while using it to get the most out of it when you do use it. It's not a finisher you can use at any time, but rather a finisher for situations in which you can absolutely tear weakened teams or take out a high value target quickly, and it feels great using it. I guess one more thing I should add is that Biograft has one very funny skin I use in all of the gameplay, and it's Phighting. I love Phighting. He is so silly. Okay, so I just gushed over about how much I love Biograft and his almost combo-like playstyle of using skills together to be a devastating damage dealer. Now let's talk about how hitting these is pretty hard. Having the lowest survivability as the glass cannon, Biograft can get completely screwed by anything. Yeah, some characters like Hyperlaser, MEDKIT, and Subspace can get completely eradicated in most scenarios, but when a character can bully Biograft away with chip damage like Rocket, or just do high damage combos on him like Sword, you will realize how little survivability Biograft really has. A major issue I have with Biograft is pretty self-explanatory. Biograft is a skill character. Biograft skills are fun, but trying to maximize them and use them well is a challenge in itself. Mess up and your small health will be gone in a matter of seconds. And don't even try to rush more than 2 people, you will be completely dead with no chance when your abilities get on cooldown unless you don't engage. So if engaging groups is hard and is inevitable, you have to play somewhat patient with your playstyle. Just spamming M2s or rushing in with E's and out, maybe even using Q on someone or anything while regaining shield. It's a weird playstyle that I tried when I didn't want to die, and sometimes it worked. However, play too passive and you can barely get anything done, while if you start playing too aggressive and you'll be wiped fast. It's this combination of skillful play while balancing this type of burst aggression playstyle that makes Biograft a hard character to learn and use properly. Oh yeah, I forgot to talk about the finisher as well. Using this is an absolute gamble. Sometimes you'll get off in a good situation and then pick off some enemies very well due to the high damage output. Other times you get off in a good situation and get completely killed so fast and make no impact, just another kill for the enemies. Because of this, I am always reluctant in using it since it's a high risk and the reward to make it worth barely has payoff because big groups of enemies are Biograft's main weakness. Combine that with the fact fighters like Boombox, Sword, Rocket, and Skateboard being complete nuisances and being able to wear down Biograft while keeping themselves healthy, Biograft has a hard time being a good character since his skill requirement is hard and makes playing him inconsistent and challenging as a result. I am very happy I actually dug into Biograft as much as I could. Not only was he a unique experience to try out, but he had his fair share of fun moments which I was not expecting. He was a fun character to try at times, despite the fact he was incredibly hard a lot of the time due to him being designed like this. I probably won't continue with him as a result of this, but I'm glad my opinion can shift on Biograft from being absolutely painful to actually being somewhat fun to use. It also shows how impactful a glass cannon character like Biograft can be when used right or wrong, since he is, again, a polarizing character in this game, and like no one else. I wish I could say more, but to cut it really short and to not make me go through a 5-minute speech, Biograft is a hard character. Thanks for watching.
the shadow of your smile. The shadow of your smile.
Skateboard is a very interesting character to talk about. He is probably the most odd character in this entire game gameplay-wise, and it's very hard to explain why. He is simply some sort of an anomaly amongst everyone else, and you can see it, but it's hard to explain it unless I really explain Skateboard's entire kit, which is unfortunately a lot of things. Skateboard is one of the melee-oriented characters, sporting an impressive 75 HP and 75 shield. Skate often uses his incredible mobility and high burst damage between his forms to put pressure on players and friend with said burst damage. While he is somewhat weak compared to other melee characters, Skateboard makes up for most of it with his mobility and tools to make him stand out as an odd character. Oh yeah, his kit. This is going to take a bit. Let's start with his kit when he is off board. His passive allows him to gradually increase his walk speed as long as he keeps moving or isn't stunned, after having a 25% haste boost unless he gets a kill or an assist, in which he gets a brief increase to 50% haste. His M1 does a 2-hit swing of his skateboard, doing 15 damage each hit while losing 5% of your haste. It's nothing really special, it's really just an average M1 move. His M2 offboard is one of the dumbest moves in this entire game. It's a charge move that ranges between 10 to 30 damage, and depending on how long you charge it before it attacks, it can stun the enemy for a maximum of 0.75 seconds. Oh god. The drawback is, laying this move is somewhat difficult if you just throw it out, but the reward for it is incredible. His Q launches him forward and has a 15 damage hitbox with a 10 damage lingering hitbox for some reason. It also immediately gives a 25% haste boost and is often used mainly as a finishing tool or a getaway tool, as the speed it gives is great and that hitbox is insanely forgiving. His E puts him on board. That's the entire move. I'll get more into it when we actually talk about the onboard section. Both his offboard and onboard share the same finisher, but I'll discuss it here to get it out of the way. Skate stands still and goes at max speed with a huge hitbox, stunning anyone he hits for 2 seconds while doing 30 damage. This is a very risky finisher that can open up opportunities for teammates on conquer maps, and also sets Skate to his highest possible speed, which is insanely helpful. Okay, now let's get into the meat of Skate's onboard kit, which you can access from offboard by pressing E. Skate's onboard M1 allows him to kick for extra speed and slightly extra damage. This is only used for getting some bit of speed, there's practically nothing else going for it unless you want some chip damage. Skate's onboard M2 allows him to do a trick on his board for 15 damage. This is mainly used for damaging purposes and vertical height to get to other spots. It's an okay tool really. Skate's onboard Q allows him to stay in place to charge a dash that gives him more speed the more he charges. The initial dash deals 10 damage and is mainly used as a tool to air stall or to get instant speed when in a weird situation. It's surprisingly helpful and maintains Skate's speedy gameplay style. Skate's onboard E has 2 properties. If you tap E, he gets off the board immediately and can do whatever he wants off board. If he holds E, he has a big hit with his skateboard that does more damage the more speed you have when dismounting. Specifically with what speed you had used it at, going from a minimum of 15 to 35 damage. This is one of Skate's many options at locking in kills due to its high damage output and somewhat fast swing speed right after. It is hard to land because of the high speed you need for good damage, but if you can land it, you can lock some kills easier. And that's Skate's entire kit. Yeah. Okay, let's just not beat around the bush. Let's talk about Skate's best tool in his arsenal. His onboard passive. Skate's onboard passive is the most important move in Skate's entire arsenal. When Skate is near a ledge and jumps, Skate will do a trick animation and land on the ground, which gives him more speed and a somewhat large hitbox on landing, which deals only 5 damage. Here's the thing though, there is no cooldown to the tricks. You can trick as many times as you want with the passive on anything that is even considered a ledge. Some trick spots look very obvious and others just make no sense half the time. This makes Skate able to be fast almost all the time as long as he mostly keeps tricking, which then also allows him to put more damage onto enemies thanks to Skate's whole board hitbox and the initial trick damage, which adds up slowly. Tricking is beautiful and a central part of Skate's game plan of hit and run, which makes it such an important tool to him. Now, I am not the best Skate player by any means, but some maps feel insanely fun to trick on during matches since it gives me tons of damage potential on enemies, or just a dopamine of hearing that trick noise. In fact, Skate's whole kit is satisfying when you start heating up and tricking everywhere with constant burst damage on enemies. It's one of those characters that just feels so fun to use, but unlike a character I love playing like Subspace, Skate gives me way more control and more execution that feels extremely satisfying to get down low. I also think Skate's kit is so unique that he really feels so different in both good and bad ways. The way he solely relies on speed is truly a one-of-a-kind character trait he fully leans into, and I personally dig the concept of it despite some of its flaws as it makes Skate a more exhilarating experience. That being said, however, Skate might be one of the worst cases of being good on specific maps in my life. Some maps either feel too cramped to use Skate, have very odd trick timings, or just don't feel fun to use him on. He is also a character that just has such a stupidly high skill ceiling as well, compounded with this. Due to Skate having such a weird style and high skill ceiling, you are bound to make so many mistakes with movement or general idea of what to use in certain moments. While this could just boil down to a skill issue, which it kinda does, I won't even lie, it just feels like I'm fighting game mechanics at this point, as Skate can sometimes have all his snowballing stopped by a few moves out of nowhere. This man gets caught by any move that halts him and he becomes so vulnerable that it's laughable. It's weird since he is such an unkillable character at times, and randomly he becomes the worst character in mere seconds. It just shows how much Skate loves being on board for the chip and how his speed is the one core thing keeping him good really. It's why Skate loves abusing it and why people absolutely hate it for the most part. Same with trying to secure kills with offboard. I am literally fighting skill issues against me, and maybe that's a good thing because using offboard Skate is hard in general because he is so vulnerable every time, and it's a hard commitment to go for. Overall, Skate just has such high positives and negatives that make him almost feel polarizing to play as in general for me, despite the absurd amount of fun I could get out of him. This would be also the time to talk about how Skate gets changed constantly, but that would be complaining about his volatile balancing, which I feel like would take a long time to discuss. But all I would say is, Skate cannot be balanced well in any way whatsoever. That's really it. I guess the last thing I could say is that he also hurts my wrist sometimes because I keep on turning the camera a lot. So, thanks Skate for giving me some wrist pains, I suppose. And that's really all I got to say about Skateboard. He is a weird character to play and I have no clue how people play this man for so long. He is so oddly dependent on maps and game modes that I really have no idea how to even say if he is strong or not. At least Hyperlaser is a simple character in execution, Skate is just all over the place. Whether he gets balanced well or stays as a weird, somewhat gimmicky fighter, Skate was honestly kind of fun to play. Learning new trick spots and just trying to see what the best approach to matches was with him was a weird learning curve that felt so different, but it was fun nonetheless. I get why people say he is annoying and an absolute nutcase of balancing, but I can't help but just have fun with him on a good amount of maps despite my somewhat lacking skill with him. I'll probably play him much more in the future on some maps just to try and get better with his unique playstyle, but for the time being, I think Skate is just a weird character and I look forward to seeing what changes he'll get sometime. Fighting is a fun game in my opinion. It's an obvious statement for me to make. After all, it's arguably one of my most played Roblox games with about over 300 hours to count towards it. Despite its gameplay loop, I always find it fun to experience new characters and play around with them because it's so fun. However, some fighters do make me feel different on how to approach situations due to unique attributes they can have. More on that later, I guess. I put a poll up just asking people their favorite character from the choices, which are all characters I cannot play for my life. Yes, this also includes Sword, trust me, I cannot play him. And after a bit, MEDKIT got the win on that poll, which had me play MEDKIT for a long period of time or so. Let's go over his kit first before I really start explaining anything else about MEDKIT. MEDKIT has 175 HP and no shield, which makes his survivability very limited since not having a rechargeable shield is troubling for him. However, he more or less counteracts this by being one of 2 healers in the game. MEDKIT is more or less considered the more offensive healer compared to the other healer, Vinestaff, who leans more into her support role unlike MEDKIT. With that being said, MEDKIT's kit has a lot to talk about, so let's get into it. MEDKIT's passive Crystallize allows MEDKIT to passively heal himself in a nearby low HP ally if he lands a headshot. MEDKIT gets 20 HP while the nearby ally gets 25, unless there is none, in which MEDKIT simply gets to 20 HP. The range of this healing is based on MEDKIT's positioning, specifically 150 studs, which, let's face it, no one's really going to keep that whole thing in mind. His passive also recharges every 3 seconds for balancing reasons. MEDKIT's primary curing cartridge is a 6-round revolver that can damage foes and heal teammates. The damage on enemies is a measly 5 damage and 10 damage when it's a headshot, while a healing body shot does 6 healing and 12 on a headshot to a teammate. The primary also has an auto-lock feature in which shots can lock onto teammates to heal them if they are nearby, which you can bypass by either landing headshots on a teammate or just zooming in with shift. The range of each shot is 100 studs with a fire rate of 0.6 seconds. MEDKIT's secondary, Fan of the Hammer, Jesus Christ, these names, quickly fires all the bullets in MEDKIT's ammo, which get damage or healed depending on who it hits. Enemies take 6 damage for every shot landed on them with a 5% slow per shot that lasts for a total of 2 seconds. If on a teammate, every shot fired heals 8 health from a teammate, which can total up to an impressive 48 healing. MEDKIT's Q ability, Crystal Shift, teleports MEDKIT in a 90 stud radius to a teammate, which does a small explosion dealing 20 damage to enemies, 15 healing to the teammate with an extra 10 for every enemy hit in the blast, which is almost never happening half the time, and applies armor to MEDKIT and the teammate for 0.75 seconds. There's also a small casting time before the ability happens, and a tiny bit of knockback as well that hits enemies, which you will almost never see. That's so great! MEDKIT's E ability, Rejuvenation Ring, spawns out a crystal that explodes a ring that can heal teammates and damage enemies. There's way too much to cover in this move, so I'll just pull up the wiki page stats for you to read them because there's a lot to cover with this move. Like, what the fuck is all of this? I am genuinely confused why there's so much stuff listed for this. Like, Jesus, it's just a healing move, come on. MEDKIT's finisher, Divine Resurrection, revives any dead ally in a range, giving them a small armored boost after respawning, giving them max HP, and also heals MEDKIT a flat 50 HP with an extra 25 for every ally he revives when the ability works. That's it, it's like the most simple thing here and it's his goddamn finisher. I don't understand why, it's really funny to me though. Talking about the moves, I have a lot to say. First off, I think MEDKIT's passive is a great idea and an execution. Rewarding a more offensive healer by dealing headshot damage for more healing is a perfect reward system for a character like MEDKIT, which pushes the offensive direction much more. Considering its cooldown is very low and can also heal you, it makes a great way to balance a reward with skill needing to aim at people's heads. Speaking of aiming, his M1 feels so off-putting to use. Maybe it's the slower fire rate or the fact the needles are so goddamn small, but it always just feels so awkward to aim at times. At close range, it becomes even more hectic because goddamn, the fire rate keeps failing me while my aim freaks out mainly because aiming is hard in close quarters. It's funny because his M2 is the exact opposite. close range, it comes in clutch and chokes mainly everywhere else. Well, except for healing people where it actually helps a ton. A strategy I learned from others is using all my ammo with M1 and after I reload, chain it to M2 to have consistent damage and healing output for everyone. It felt comfortable and while I still somewhat fumble it, it became muscle memory the more I played. The combination of these two moves make MEDKIT so much more manageable to play, albeit it was much harder than it sounds due to constant aiming and M2's somewhat annoying vertical recoil. MEDKIT's Q, however, just makes me mad. It's a great movement tool to use and it does allow you to get in the battle quicker to help teammates against others, but the 90 stutter range really gets me a lot of the time. There will be times I try to teleport to a teammate to escape someone since MEDKIT gets targeted at every match, and that stutter range absolutely destroys me half the time, and fighting off some fighters is near impossible in one-on-ones or if your team just doesn't notice. In a lot of clips, you will constantly see me running trying to use Q on a teammate only for that stutter range to completely screw me over, and I just feel a sense of just pain and agony. However, outside of that, this ability is greatly useful for MEDKIT and anything with mobility is always a plus on a character that lacks it. MEDKIT's E is existing, honestly. It can close kills, heal teammates, and that's about it. I have nothing really to say for this, honestly. It's just a good tool that is effective at many points. So yeah, it's good and that's literally all I can say about it. I'm just gonna be real with you. MEDKIT's finisher though, oh my god, this one. MEDKIT's finisher might be one of the best and the outright worst finisher in the entire game depending on the game mode of all things. On Conquer, it's actually amazing to use, especially near the end, as it allows your teammates to contest a point for a longer amount of time and extra healing for yourself is always great to have. On Annihilate, it revives your teammates with no shield, which means some fighters, especially Biograft, just die in like 2 seconds and the revive was pretty much pointless and actively detrimental to almost your entire team. That's even considering you could even get an out in time, as the casting time feels like an eternity compared to every other finisher, and if you die, the crystal won't even proc and no one will be healed or revived, which completely wastes it. Also, while it doesn't come into play too much, the stutter range can be somewhat annoying depending on how big the map is, especially ones like Underground War, where spawn is like 10 seconds away from the point. So you can't just proc it after spawning or you get basically no use from it on most maps. Also, the fact this could be an active downside in Annihilate is just plainly stupid to me. Like, I know it was somewhat broken when it healed the shield, but that's just hilarious to me. Like, what the hell happened? To understand a little bit more about MEDKIT, we gotta talk about two things: healing priority and target priority. Healing priority is a simple concept. Teammates that need HP more than others are a higher healing priority. There is a whole part of the wiki that describes it, but in short, teammates with tons of HP like Sword can help get easy finisher points and benefit greatly from having their HP healed, while other fighters like Vinestaff and Hyperlaser don't need it as much due to being self-sufficient or usually being on the outskirts of the map. It's a very simple concept I learned while playing MEDKIT, as I tried to prioritize my healing as best as I can, unless it was someone like Vinestaff who could easily heal themselves up. But hey, free finisher points I guess. What doesn't help for MEDKIT is when you learn about target priority. Target priority is simply explained as this: the more valuable the target, the more you focus to killing the target. To make this more understandable, here's this small chart of the fighters based off target priority. We got the normal targets, the bulky targets that are slow, these supports right here, and all the way at the top is the big free fighters. While each have their own reasons, MEDKIT being a healer makes him have a huge target on his back. So you will constantly be bombarded by fighters trying to kill you, especially since you don't have a failsafe of a shield at play. This is key to understanding how fun MEDKIT is, because you will get targeted almost every game and you will feel the pain of not being able to do your role because of stupid stuff like this. It will never get fun, it will always be painful, it will always be annoying, and it's probably the biggest hurdle when trying to play MEDKIT because you can't simply stop it. Some characters like Skateboard, Shuriken, literally more than half the goddamn fighters are almost full counters for the most part unless you have the human equivalent to aim assist or embody task level movement. Some targets are too bulky, too fast, do too much damage, and the lack of mobility in overall scenarios MEDKIT can really win, make him a character that is incredibly unfun to play, and make such an important fighter become hell to play as. And that's okay. MEDKIT is a high value target for a reason. His role is important, and having many fighters that can exploit his weaknesses is completely fine. I just learned to accept that people will target me, and it went from an anger-inducing experience to a depressing experience to an experience I just had to accept, and I accepted it. Despite my attempts to try adapting, I don't get mad when I constantly keep being targeted because that's how it is. That's how it works. His lack of mobility can't really be played around, so fighters like Skateboard can exploit it, and instead of hopelessly aiming shots, you need to have a plan that revolves around your team. Now, listen, I hate relying on my own team to get stuff done, as I have very low trust in people I don't know, and overall, relying on a random team is just an inconsistent method. But with MEDKIT, you have to play to your team and have to adapt to whatever your team is using. If your team is bad, try to play around it and keep all of your teammates as healthy as possible. If you're being targeted by a fighter you cannot handle, hope your team will start trying to kill the fighter that is being a nuisance. It's not a perfect strategy, but the best way to play MEDKIT in my eyes is to actively use your team to your strengths and weaknesses. Your team can take out targets that absolutely screw you over, and your strengths of keeping your team alive by being on the offense and overall supporting them gets the most out of it. MEDKIT kind of taught me to be a more active player for my team instead of more active for myself. Now, obviously, MEDKIT can be more alone and distant from his team, which works, but the target on your back will always grow, and some skateboard or shuriken will be an asshole and make your life terrible at some point. And instead of complaining, you try to adapt to it, or sometimes it won't be adaptable and you just need to deal with it, or try your best despite the odds stacked against you. The learning curve I experienced was so unique and incredibly challenging, and while I don't think I got over the curve completely, I feel like with enough playing and overall understanding of my faults and MEDKIT as a character, I feel like my overall game plan with MEDKIT could just grow from here. It's not fun. I will admit here that MEDKIT is not fun in the slightest, and I hate playing as him, but in a way, that kind of adds to the fun of him. There's so much stuff really against him in my eyes, despite being a good fighter, because people know how great he could be when supporting his team. You just need to learn and try to really get through those hurdles. I probably won't touch MEDKIT again, to be completely honest with you, but this experience really made me learn more about overall roles, teamwork, and just how important adaptation is when a fighter, despite how clear-cut the fighters can be in their kits. I know this turned into a tangent about accepting flaws and just accepting that I have a skill issue with a fighter, but I genuinely mean it when MEDKIT was a one-of-a-kind experience for me. His plan and kit is so vastly different from everyone else, and while it wasn't fun for the most part, it was somewhat fun just learning more and more as I played him. Cycling M1 and M2, activating my finisher more consistently, trying to use my team to help my weaknesses, it was actually a ton of involvement I needed to do with everything about MEDKIT that made him change my approach to him and appreciate it much more. With all of this being said, I am never playing MEDKIT almost ever again. It was a learning curve I can accept, but repeatedly falling into this pattern of targeting and such just won't be fun to me. I know a few MEDKIT players who could kinda deal with it and like MEDKIT, but for me personally, I absolutely cannot recommend this character much despite how much fun it was slowly learning. I might play MEDKIT more, but this whole role compression of offenses with healing never felt too good of a synergy with each other, and it made MEDKIT's whole gameplay just not too fun for me personally. Maybe I might make an update video about MEDKIT to see if the targeting hell was much easier to overcome, but as of now, this character just wasn't fun for the most part outside of the adaptations I tried to do. It just sucked. Also, MEDKIT just loses a lot. I know he isn't supposed to have great offenses, but half the time he cannot stand toe-to-toe with anyone, and with the addition of Scythe, it made MEDKIT's impression on me even worse. That's really all I got to say for MEDKIT. He made me learn so much weird things about the game and just made me approach things differently. While I don't like playing him much and feel like his learning curve due to his target priority is very unforgiving, it was a unique experience I will actually somewhat miss trying to get over. I might play him more just to try and really click with him sometime, but with that being said, I think this will be the end of the road for now when it comes to this damn character. Jeez, this video took way longer to make. Had a new laptop so I lost some footage, was busy with tons of real life shenanigans, but I was finally able to put this whole project to rest. Maybe next time I should actually do a fighter that's way more simple like Sword, because this took so long to make and I'm very overdue on this one. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed and have a good day. Just a quick heads up before this video starts, I would like to say that all the footage recorded in this video was around late May to early June, so any changes made in the Vine staff after that time period will not be factored into this video. I was kind of dreading this video because considering how the MEDKIT video went, I was expecting a similar result when doing games for this video. But we're too far in and I commit to the ideas I want to accomplish, so here you guys go. Vine staff is one of two main healers in fighting, the other one being MEDKIT, in which they both specialize in different kinds of healing. Vine staff is usually referred to as the more support oriented healer, while MEDKIT is the more offensive one. Before we can really talk much more however, let's just get into the stats first. Vine staff has 100 HP and 75 shield, which is surprisingly not too good for Vine staff specifically, but overall it's a lot of bulk. 75 and a rechargeable shield is huge and synergizes great with Boombox, and having high HP is always nice to have. Vine staff also relies on a different healing mechanic in the form of regeneration. Thanks to her kit, she utilizes AoE regeneration to heal her teammates over time instead of instantly healing them like MEDKIT. This gives her a unique role as a healer as she sacrifices the instant safety with a reliable AoE and almost more passive way of initiating recovery. We'll get to all of that in the moves however, so let's go into the moves. Vine staff's passive ties with other tools in her kit, so we'll get to that later. So let's start with Vine staff's M1. Vine staff's M1, 1000 petals, shoots a barrage of low damage petals, each dealing 3 damage at a fire rate of 0.11 seconds. I didn't know it was that fast, god. The petals travel a range of 250 studs, and Vine staff has a total of 50 ammo before needing to do a quick reload. The petals also have a bit of a spawn offset, which causes the petals to come out at a unique angle to your crosshair and act as projectiles. Vine staff's M2, beginning anew, places a sprout down. This sprout uses a seed from the middle of your crosshair which act as charges. You can store up to 5 charges before needing to plant more sprouts to maximize efficiency. The sprouts also offer base healing with a set amount of regeneration, which is great to address. These sprouts can be placed on walls, slanted surfaces, and ceilings as well. They also have a set amount of HP that when destroyed won't offer any more healing and will need to be replanted by Vine staff herself. Hey, this is Nico here. Post-editing, I wanted to add a very important thing that I completely forgot to talk about, and it's the fact that the sprouts have a level system the more they live, and they give more regeneration and base healing for every level they get, until they explode, which gives regeneration and does damage, I'm pretty sure. I showed it in the video editing, but I forgot to explain it in the move, which was pretty damn stupid, because the level system is a pretty essential part of Vine staff's M2, so I apologize in advance about that, but yes, it has a level system. It's really important. It's really complicated, so I just wanted to put this in here. This all ties into her passive, Death Brings Life. Death Brings Life allows Vine staff to get another charge for her M2 if she hits a total of 12 petals or gets a kill. She also gets 5% haste to herself if sprouts are in a 50 stud radius of her for each individual sprout. Along with this, any sprout around her when this passive activates progresses a stage, which gives the sprouts more regeneration until they reach their max stage and explode, doing damage. It's a lot to say, so I'll show the stats and other small details for these because god, there is a bit to digest with her whole passive. Vine staff's Q, Preservation, heals a teammate for 10 HP and for 8 seconds, 40% of the damage they do turns into healing for them and Vinestaff. If the teammate is able to do a total of 50 damage, Vinestaff gets another seed added to her and 2 charges. Vinestaff's E, Root of the Oak, fires 3 branches that can root enemies. The branches do 9 damage on a direct hit and do 6 damage in their somewhat forgiving splash radius. They stay rooted for a full second if a direct hits, and the splash hitbox will only root for 0.4 seconds. If you hit a sprout with this ability, the sprout activates based on its level and creates an explosion that also roots enemies. And yes, hitting an enemy with this also gives you an M2 charge. Vinestaff's finisher, Lotus of the Den, summons a lotus flower that heals and gives allies regeneration 3 times as long as Vinestaff is alive. The Lotus does 20 direct healing with 30 regeneration in each wave. Every wave happens in intervals of 6 seconds and has a huge AoE hitbox to boot. While this finisher is active, allies in range of the Lotus activate beginning anew, and all the sprouts you place during this ability's uptime now spawn at level 2s. Yeah, that's a lot to take in compared to MEDKIT. Her kit is insanely unique and does have a lot of uses to it, surprisingly enough. At first glance, her M1 looks incredibly underwhelming. The pedals move slow as hell, they barely do any damage, and all they do is give you M2 charges, and you'd be correct honestly. However, these pedals surprisingly chip down slower targets like Katana and Banhammer extremely well thanks to the high rate of fire. It also makes them big targets to gain tons of charges for your M2 to place more regeneration sprouts, which is always great. That being said, her M1 is still a somewhat slow projectile, which makes it extremely hard to aim properly, especially against more mobile targets, and it's also hard closing kills with it, but it's surprisingly a decent damage tool on a support based fighter. Vinestaff's M2, however, you just need to spam. You need to spam the living hell out of this move as best as you can around your teammates to consistently get regeneration and healing up for everyone. Since you have 5 reserve slots, you have ample time to start placing them as they barely interrupt your M1 whatsoever. This tool is essential to Vinestaff's survival and support game plan, and without it, Vinestaff practically does nothing for the team. You can also use it in tandem with your E after a few sprouts just to gain some sort of health if needed in a pinch. It's such a fantastic ability that makes Vinestaff stand out with many use cases and must be constantly used to make the most of it. Vinestaff's Q is a weird skill as you basically use it on a healthy ally. The healing it offers isn't enough, and the 40% damage lifesteal isn't worth all the risk on a low HP ally. Besides, the main use of being able to heal Vinestaff and give more M2 charges is great to have as it creates a chain reaction to get more M2s, which in turn heals everyone else better, which makes a net positive for your team. It's a clutch ability and can really get more sprouts on the field thanks to how reliable it is in general. However, you need to really make sure you use this on an ally that can dish out amazing damage on the field in a small amount of time. Vinestaff's E is literally the all-purpose flower tool in her kit. You can heal sprouts for extra burst healing, you can hit opponents to run away, you can close kills with it, you can hit sprouts for teammates, you can do practically anything useful with this skill. This skill does it all. It literally gives Vinestaff some more offensive pressure and insanely useful support capabilities when needed, and it does literally everything with the sprouts. There's so many things you could do with E that makes it so useful in really any scenario needed. It's that good. Vinestaff's finisher is usually pretty good. On Conquer, this finisher can completely lock down the point with your team as sprouts offer more regeneration while the ring adds more regeneration and healing during it, which makes this very powerful as long as your team makes the most out of it. And surprisingly enough, even in Annihilate, it's actually really good on maps where you really want to occupy one spot on the map, and especially helpful for tanky fighters that need constant healing. It doesn't really have a downside compared to MEDKIT's finisher, which can absolutely screw you over in a different game mode due to game design, which makes it much more versatile to throw out when you get it. Just don't die or else the effects stop and it just becomes a waste of a move. It's decent on Annihilate for the most part and an excellent finisher to spam on Conquer with no drawbacks to really speak of. I can't believe I'm gonna say this, but Vine Staff was actually fun. Throughout the games I played, Vine Staff has consistently given me enjoyment, maybe because of the passive healing and overall ability management that keeps her engaging. Getting used to her weird M1 and trying to play the backlines of my team really felt more active and way less miserable than playing MEDKIT. I know, I make many comparisons to MEDKIT and Vine Staff, but that's because they serve the same purpose, just in different ways. MEDKIT offers instant healing via his damage output, which makes your healing much harder to achieve, and despite being an offensive healer, I find his offensive kit to be incredibly awkward to use. With Vine Staff, you need to play extremely passive and plant sprouts everywhere to offer consistent regeneration, which can still benefit teammates, just not as reliable as MEDKIT's instant healing. However, this also means she doesn't have to play too offensively and just try to play a more defensive role for team, acting as her protection to keep healing. This might sound awful because I hate relying on others, but when I played more Vine Staff, I got used to it and actually felt more like a team player for the most part. And surprisingly enough, Vine Staff continued to be fun to play as despite the problems support usually have when it comes to how big of a target they are. It felt like maybe MEDKIT just wasn't as fun of a healer to play as, and maybe Vine Staff was actually the fighter I needed to get tons of fun and enjoyment out of this sort of archetype. So Vine Staff is fun, right? Well, that's complicated. I forgot to mention one little thing about Vine Staff that makes her undoubtedly one of the most inconsistent fighters to play as. A trait so bad that it could literally ruin any game Vine Staff can have at a moment due to its polarizing nature. Mobility. Every single fighter, with the exception of Katana, has some form of a mobility tool, and even then, Katana can stay airborne with his M1 and has a grapple tool to pull fighters closer to him. The problem here is that Vine Staff has no mobility tools. All she really has when it comes to mobility is slight haste around sprouts, and that's really it. On paper, this doesn't sound too terrible because despite every fighter having a mobility option, you don't need consistent movement to be capable. After all, there are fighters like Banhammer with inconsistent movement that could hold their own in scenarios. The problem comes when you factor in that Vine Staff practically loses against almost every single fighter in the game except for Katana, which isn't even that impressive. But this problem gets multiplied to hell when you also factor in that Vine Staff is a healer. And guess what? Healers get targeted almost every game, and you see why this is a huge problem. And guess what? Vine Staff's offensive capabilities are not good. Once Vine Staff gets rushed down, you need to pray to God your team can save you, especially depending on what fighter it is. Yeah, Vine can weaken some fighters or even disrupt them like Skateboard, but against others, it's practically just death. Try fighting a boombox or slingshot with Vine Staff and you can see how unwinnable this is. Boombox against Vine Staff might genuinely be the hardest counter matchup I ever seen due to Boombox pressing E and now Vine Staff can't do any damage to him. It's that bad. This also means Vine Staff needs to be completely aware of her surroundings and how to retreat. Juking enemies can only get you so far before you just die because of your lacking offenses and a team not being there to save you. And unlike MEDKIT, who has some way to deal with most of the fighters, Vine Staff practically needs her team to help her kill over half of the fighters. The only fighters she could consistently take on are Katana, Subspace, and Banhammer if he can't use Q and completely screw your retreating. Which is rare because Banhammer loves using Q. This type of weakness delegates Vine Staff into being completely overly reliant on her team to get great results. MEDKIT can at least hold his own with damage, and positioning as a hit scan weapon is far more reliable to use than a Nerf gun that could barely hit any fighters mid-range. It paints a big, vulnerable target on your back that could completely screw you over in many ways. There's also the weakness of the fact that Vine Staff sprouts could just get killed and now your regeneration gets completely halted. If a finish like Katana's happens, you won't know damn well your sprouts are going to be gone, and then you struggle to get them back on the field if the constant regeneration is now gone. This is also a reason why Vine Staff is so inconsistent, because all of your healing is reliant on how much the sprouts can live, and if they don't live, your entire game plan goes to shambles. And yet, Vine Staff is still actually fun. Maybe MEDKIT has made me a masochist in retrospect because that fighter made me feel dread, but Vine Staff didn't feel as aggravating or disappointing. Her weaknesses feel like they were surprisingly healthy for a very support-oriented character like her. She isn't some weird, damaging supporter like Boombox or a trippy healer like MEDKIT. She is simply a true support character, and I like that. It tests how I can avoid my own fights and how I can use my team to my fullest advantage that I can. It also tests my positioning and movement that way, as due to terrible mobility, positioning matters a lot for Vine Staff. One misstep in positioning and you're being disconnected from your whole team, or just getting jumped without the support of your team. In fact, I would say Vine Staff is the most movement central fighter to learn, aside from maybe Boombox, but it's an important skill to have to juke fighters, confuse them, and potentially run away while minimizing damage. That being said, I obviously don't like the factor of playing into my teams, as I stated multiple times in many ways, but Vine Staff leaning hard into her support role makes her kinda force myself to play into my team's strengths, which help me appreciate her more. It's not fun, but it's really mandatory to get the most out of Vine Staff, and I really like that approach instead of kinda sloppily fitting into a team player and an offensive fighter like MEDKIT. And yet, I am genuinely struggling to find what makes her so enthralling to me. I spent days literally thinking what the hell I feel when I play Vine Staff, and despite how absolutely flawed she is somehow fun to play despite those huge setbacks. Maybe it's the passive healing, the automatic M1, the spamming of M2, ability usage. I literally do not know what it is, but Vine Staff feels like a complete character with big flaws and big positives. And that's all I can say, really. I would go as far as to say she might be one of the more underpowered characters, or maybe she is so flawed in a balanced way that feels like it's my fault when I die for the most part, because some fighters just invalidate you, but that's a whole different issue if it is. For now though, I have absolutely no clue why I love Vine Staff so much and why she is such a weird fighter. So after all of this, I have learned many things. Vine Staff made me care a lot about teamwork and movement, made me wary about using my team to help me out in tough spots. It taught me how much I hate MEDKIT. Oh my god, I hate this guy. And overall, I liked Vine Staff. Very shocking after how much I didn't like MEDKIT, to put it nicely. And definitely a big shocker to me. Hell, I might play more Vine Staff in the future since she is surprisingly fun to use and I enjoyed my experience with her. So, in conclusion, Vine Staff is a weird character, and surprisingly enough, Vine Staff is also a fun character to play as. The following video is not a guide on how to play Shuriken or whatnot. It is mainly my experiences and overall opinion on Shuriken from a person who has never touched Shuriken ever since his release. You could take it as such, however, if you want to, but I advise doing so since I am not a dedicated Shuriken main. Either way, enjoy! Ah yes, Shuriken. The Thieves' Den fighter that was released in April of 2023 is a fighter all about speed, stealth, and shurikens. What else did you expect? He is also the second ranged fighter to be a part of the Thieves' Den faction, with the other being Slingshot. but we don't need to do some sort of comparison of the two in any way at the very least. I guess let's cut to the chase and immediately break down the stats here. Shuriken has 75 HP and 50 shield, tying him the lowest amount of overall bulk at 125, which is the same as Biograft of all things. However, low bulk does fit his intended playstyle, with being some sort of a sneaky flanking character that utilizes his high damage involving the enemy's backs and his high mobility that allows him to access such approaching options against the enemy. He also has some unique properties associated with him like anti-heal, which make him stand out with unique traits and advantages he could give to his team via his complex kit. This reminds me, let's just waste no time and immediately get into his kit. Shuriken's passive, as fast as the wind, gives Shuriken a 20% boost to haste and bounce. This bonus lowers by 1% for every bit of damage Shuriken's HP takes until it regenerates after not being hit for a few seconds. This passive also grants Shuriken the ability to wall perch by pressing jump next to a wall, which allows him to stick on a wall for a maximum of 3 seconds before being detached or if he jumps off the wall, so that's also cool. Shuriken's M1, Stars of the Storm, charges up Shurikens to a maximum of 3 to throw in front of him. The Shurikens pierce through things and do 8 damage each and 10 damage to the hidden enemy's back. Shuriken also gets a tiny bit of bound when charging the Shurikens, limiting his jump height, and has 15 ammo for when he fires. The Shurikens also count as projectiles that go insanely fast with a very low lifespan, making Shuriken go into more mid-range combat because of that. Also, the charge time of the Shurikens is very fast, which makes it an incentive to charge up the Shurikens. Shuriken's M2, Stab of the Betrayer, is a chargeable attack that could propel Shuriken forward with a lingering melee hitbox. The attack does 15 damage if it hits and does 25 damage if it hits an opponent's back, along with applying anti-heal for 3 seconds if a backstab was hit and slowing down the target based on if they hit the back or not. The longer the charge is, the more Shuriken gets sent forward instead of doing more damage. Shuriken's Q, Traverse the Horizon, allows Shuriken to grapple onto any surface really. Shuriken will immediately dash to it and perch at the end, or he can press jump midway through the grapple to keep the momentum from the initial grapple to go flying in that direction. If you get hit during the grapple, Shuriken will cancel the grapple and go nowhere. The grapple also has a range of 200 studs for some reason, and pretty much locks Shuriken in place for a second before grappling. Shuriken's E, Illusions of the Smoke, spawns a clone of Shuriken to walk forward, copy jumps, and even shoot your primary when you do while staying in place, with its Shurikens doing 5 damage. The clone has 30 HP as well, and Shuriken slows down immediately when spawning the clone. If Shuriken recasts this ability, Shuriken warps to the clone's position, causing a small explosion that does 20 damage and inflicts slow and bound on all targets hit by it. You could also hold E to make the clone transform into a teammate before spawning, so that's also an option you could do. This move has a lot of things going on, so it's hard to explain this in a cohesive manner like this. Shuriken's finisher, Guillotine Blossom, launches Shuriken into the air and spawns 5 rotating Shurikens around him that turn counterclockwise and slowly fire at his crosshair aim over a period of time. The spinning Shurikens do 8 damage each, which rack up fast, and the Shurikens thrown do 15 damage and apply 3 seconds of anti-heal each. During this finisher, Shuriken can still use his abilities freely to add more damage into the mix. Alright, you got all that info? Good, because now we are gonna kind of break it all down now after I talk about anti-heal, or anti-heal, or whatever you want to call it. Honestly, I could care less, I have no clue. Anti-heal is exactly in the name. It disrupts HP healing both passively and by healers. If it's put onto an enemy, that enemy cannot be healed by any means necessary. If anti-heal is applied to a healer, that healer cannot heal any HP until the anti-heal has worn off or it has been cleansed. Just putting this in here just so you can understand the entire use of anti-heal, since it's a bit of an odd thing at times. Alright, we can finally move on now. As fast as the wind is a main feature of Shuriken. An extra speed and jump boost is huge for such a frail fighter, especially when he needs those boosts to successfully dodge hits and make him as hard to hit as possible. especially when he starts bunny hopping. While the 50 shield does make it a little limiting, this tool gives Shuriken way more options to move freely thanks to the extra jump boost. The perching is also pretty unique for movement mix-ups in fights, or to simply stall on a wall for a period of time. However, I found perching to be pretty awkward at times, as it just feels like a magnetic force against every single damn surface in the game, which can feel somewhat disorienting, especially when I might press spacebar more than once. Stars of the Storm is such a strange move to me, however. While the damage, extra back damage, and overall lifespan of the shurikens are fine, the fact this move works as a projectile is fairly interesting. Due to this, you might need some sort of timing when firing this, as mid-range opponents won't instantly be hit by this attack, which gives some sort of skill challenge to the shuriken player. The move also has a fast charge up, which makes Shuriken able to fire out free shurikens fairly quickly, and even be able to bypass the bound it gives with proper timing. Despite the projectile tracking nature of it, this M1 is absolutely amazing for Shuriken's flanking playstyle, and can rack up tons of damage fairly quickly. Stab of the Betrayer though? Oh my god, this move is crazy. So if you're behind an opponent, you can instantly press M2 to do 25 damage, and apply anti-heal, along with slow as well, just to make sure. You can also charge it for an easier time hitting enemies, but still, the amount of reward this move gives is insane. This could also be applied to tech like trick stabbing, which involves flicking the camera to hit someone's back much easier to consistently hit the anti-heal. Even without the backstab, this tool gives some close range versatility and firepower to Shuriken's kit, along with the dash, making it a solid option to close some distance. This option is an absolute game changer, especially against fighters like Vine Staff or more bulky fighters like Katana, who really appreciate the tons of healing they could get. It's a defining aspect of Shuriken's kit. From a central tool to another, Traverse the Horizon might be the most fun skill a fighter ever has. The grapple allows for great rollout options and instantly gets Shuriken into the front lines or ensure him access to a back line as long as he hits a surface that can get him to the direction. The grapple cancelling though, oh my god, the grapple cancelling makes this move a literal gem and one of the most fun tools in the entire game. Due to retaining momentum, this move makes Shuriken go flying with this move, or allow Shuriken's movement to become very quick to engage in the fights easier thanks to how versatile the mobility is. While the cooldown doesn't make it a fully spammable move to use, its use is undeniably fun as hell, and it gives Shuriken many options to follow his game plan or to simply go around the map and do whatever the hell he wants. Just don't take damage and you'll be fine. Illusions of the Smoke is a bit of an odd move to talk about. The clone's projectiles aren't too effective, but it's great when spamming down a choke point or straight path for some extra damage, but you would usually use it as a mobility or distraction tool, as teleporting to the clone gives some great ways to escape threats or to distract fighters thanks to spawning it. The offensive use cases of this ability are surprisingly great though, as teleporting to the clone can allow Shuriken to get high damage onto targets and allows him to apply tons of pressure along with his stab for a quick kill. This explosion is also notable, as not only does it help immensely if a melee threat gets slowed, but the explosion can help deboard Skateboard, which is an absolutely huge plus for Shuriken's survivability. The ability to make the clone a teammate isn't too helpful, but hey, you can find a use for more distracting if needed. It's a great offensive and defensive tool for Shuriken to convey the stealthy flanker playstyle, and allows him to really make better getaways or as a way to close distance and start fights with close range pressure. Guillotine Blossom is a very destructive finisher to use. The spinning shurikens all have active hitboxes, which gives it great crowd control against bulky targets and can dispose of frailer targets and can even scare off fighters like Biograft due to its damage output. The anti-heal attributes make this tool an amazing way to stop healers and conquer holds for your team to take full advantage of, and combined with the throwing of shurikens, it makes this finisher not only a great tool to break bulky fighters, but a tool to exploit healers and make them have an incredibly rough time trying to live. Combining this ult with all the mobility Shuriken gets and having access to M1 and M2 during it makes this a high damage output option that can help with any scenario. That being said, use this tool mainly against bulky targets on Annihilate, as using this in a crowd on Annihilate is highly risky, since dying in that mode is more dangerous and Shuriken wouldn't want to get damaged a lot during it. With that being said, this finisher is an amazing tool to further push Shuriken's utility and his insane damage output, especially as a flanker to surprise the opponent. So Shuriken sounds very fun on paper, right? Well, yeah, he does. And in practice, Shuriken is exactly that. Fun. His entire flanking kit gives him a unique role to bully backliners and healers while using the most of his mobility to evade hits and eventually get away to give his team a huge opening due to anti-heal and raw damage output. Getting used to his kit was a bit of a weird experience, as either due to the amount of healer trauma or just not playing a lot of ranged characters, trying to go for flanks wasn't on my mind too much and really more or less felt like an afterthought at times, or straight up not even doing it and trying to aggro the opponent head on. Thankfully, I did get used to going for a more backline approach on the enemy, or striking a balance between handling the backliners and helping against the threats in the front line, since Shuriken's damage output is just that high. And hell, Shuriken's matchup against the backliner fighters like Vinestaff and Hyperlaser are heavily in his favor due to his way better close quarters options and being able to exploit his mobility to the max. And even against some other fighters like Sword, Rocket, or Banhammer, Shuriken can have a decent time dealing with them, albeit a Banhammer Q can be very deadly to Shuriken, since Banhammer can potentially catch up and force Shuriken into a one-on-one scenario. Shuriken really just uses the map and terrain to his fullest advantages to flank effectively and help his team with anti-heal, among other stuff, which makes him a strong fighter to have. Maps with alternate routes like Swordfight in the Heights, hiding platforms like Baguio Skate Park, or great ways to rush into a backline with grapple cancels like Chaos Canyon and Iron Cafe, are prime maps where Shuriken could put his flanking game plan to action, or just generally help out a ton. Yeah, some other maps aren't too promising to Shuriken, but he doesn't have a fully map dependent playstyle and is honestly very flexible on a ton of maps, unlike a certain fighter who wields a gun. With all being said, however, a fighter like Shuriken is not without faults. Well, it's mainly two faults. The first fault is his long cooldowns, because holy hell, this man has long cooldowns. The M2's 6-second cooldown isn't bad at all, which allows Shuriken to spam this on any battle he is fighting, but dear lord, the cooldown for his Q and E are 14 seconds and 12 seconds respectively, and the E cooldown starts when the clone dies, despawns, or teleports to it, so it could be confusing to time it. This made Shuriken somewhat feel like ability management, as these tools are essential to his rollouts and escapes, so being caught with these cooldowns up can likely lead you to a death sentence. And it also means you shouldn't be like me and throughout the queue for short bursts of movement, even though it worked for me. It's an incredibly stupid thing to do, but I found it fun as hell, so yeah, that too. Point is, he needs good usage of when his abilities can get the most value, or just life and death scenarios. The second fault, and his even bigger problem, is his frailty, which is pretty expected for Shuriken. 75 HP and 50 shield is deceptively low and makes Shuriken heavily rely on his high mobility and his passive to effectively dodge attacks, especially when 50 shield can only help you against so much. Don't forget the fact that some moves quite literally screw you over, like Sword's Empowered E or Katana's Grapple, in which those moves completely tank your gameplay or flat out kill you if they connect due to how much damage the combos could do to you. This obviously shows that Shuriken should be played, well, very carefully, and should have escape options at the ready due to how frail he is in almost every scenario. It's even better when the fighters that can take advantage of this bulk also include fighters that are pretty efficient in shutting down Shuriken in general. While Shuriken does have a couple of positive or equal matchups, some like Skateboard are fast enough to avoid your Shurikens effectively and shutting you down off-board due to his combos dealing around 60 damage, which forces you to play even more patiently with a team, or going straight for a D-board with a clone or backstab, which is really hard to do for me. Same thing applies to Boombox, as his shield and knockback are an annoyance for Shuriken to deal with, as his E blocks practically anything, and trying to engage close range against Boombox is pretty much a death sentence unless he is very low, which is a hard situation to even come by as Shuriken. But you might ask, do these setbacks of frailty and long cooldowns offset the things I like about Shuriken? Do these big issues really make Shuriken a polarizing character? Hell no! Shuriken is fun as all hell to play as, and I really don't care if people find him annoying, because man, it's a blast playing as him. Don't get me wrong, he can be annoying at times to play as due to his health, but once you get into your game plan of flanking or doing a mixture of flanking and other styles, Shuriken is ultimately satisfying. Landing backstabs, grapple canceling, maximizing the finisher, being able to get away from enemies, it's all an exhilarating experience. The ways he has to deal with fighters are pretty interesting, and thankfully there was a pinned guide in the Shuriken Bogcom channel, because without that, I would have no clue what the hell I was doing right or wrong in some matchups and how I can handle certain threats as Shuriken. And it also made me feel insanely stupid. Wait, I thought the threshold was 25%. What? Have I been lying to myself? Or did they buff it and I just don't know? I thought the threshold was like 25%. This is 33%, right? Yeah, because Shuriken's HP is like 75. Yeah, what the hell? That is so weird. I've been lying to myself. Rockets aren't as fast as Shurikens. Begin arcing downwards at 60 studs? What? Wait, the rockets have a arc? In a way, Shuriken is probably the fighter you grow the most with over time. It's about optimizing approaches, movement, and overall aim with projectiles among other things, which shows that the ceiling for this character is pretty high. Hell, I've seen a few better Shuriken players in action, and the things they do are absolutely insane to me and almost somewhat inspire me in a way because of how they make Shuriken into an agile, aggressive mosquito that is capable of dishing fast damage and unpredictable movement to make it incredibly hard to hit him. It sounds kinda stupid to say this, but it generally makes me want to play Shuriken more and improve with him as a result of how fun he is to use and the limits he can reach as a character. The fun of him keeps me playing and improving. I am surprisingly glad I was able to love Shuriken like this, since at first I found him to be an annoying character due to his projectiles and weird kit that's filled with movement and close range options. But now, I think his kit has amazing synergy of his hit and run flanking game plan that makes him hard to hit, dish a lot of damage, and be a glass cannon of sorts. I will probably continue to play Shuriken more and more over time due to this, and even though it now seems I am just rambling, it's mainly because I just really love this character's style now. So overall, Shuriken is a character I think is fun and gives a pure dopamine rush. Or in better terms, Shuriken is a weird character. Before this video starts, I have a playlist of all the associated videos with this series from the oldest to the newest. You could check it out in the description or my channel if you want to, but they will all vary in quality among different eras of the game, so just keep that in mind. Subspace, the Blackrock scientist, is a support fighter introduced back in late 2022 as the third support fighter in the game, who uses his capabilities to be annoying to the enemy team as much as he can. He relies on the Subspace trip mine gear, and despite all of his all over the place lore, he is a character that is insanely weird in this game in many different ways. How, you might ask? Well, let's quickly see why by going through his overall stats first. Subspace has 175 HP, which seems odd since he doesn't seem to be a healer, but combined with his overall game plan, make him an annoying force to the enemy team. He consistently relies on area denial and applying poison and vulnerability to enemies, making him take more damage and less bulky as a result. The vulnerability is on a percentage and caps at 50% more damage taken, so if someone has 20 vulnerability against an attack that does 10 damage, they will take 12 damage, which makes stronger targets way less bulky and easier to beat. With his kit, he applies tons of vulnerability and poison at enemies, and attempts to disorient them as much as possible and help his team make substantial progress against them and the team as a whole thanks to it. To not spoil anything else, let's just quickly get into the moves of Subspace to understand him more. Subspace's passive, Soul Stealer, gives Subspace 25 HP after every assist or kill he gets. Yeah, that's the entire passive. Subspace's M1, Trip Mine, fires out a trip mine. Firing at the ground or not hitting anyone will spawn a mine that arms and explodes if anyone comes in the activation radius, 30 seconds pass, or if Subspace presses R. These mines also apply 10% vulnerability and do 10 damage along with 10 poison damage. You can place up to 5 mines before you can place any more, but you can also directly hit enemies with an explosion for less poison damage and less vulnerability, albeit at a much faster, consistent pace. Subspace's M2, Fallen Star, spawns an area to where Subspace aims and any enemy hit by it gets launched into the air and gets hit with 10 damage and 10% vulnerability. Subspace can recast it if enemies get hit by it to launch them downwards, dealing extra damage and vulnerability while also applying slow and grounded based on how much time they were in the air before the recast. Subspace can also hit himself with this, but can't use the recast on himself. Subspace's Q, Comet Carnage, fires a crystal projectile with a small arc. Once it hits a surface or a player, it explodes into a poison mist that deals poison damage, slow, and applies vulnerability for every target in it for a period of time before disappearing. His E, Mist Rush, makes Subspace invisible and gains 25% bounce and increased speed for about 1.5 seconds. When activated, Subspace cleanses all debuffs from him and any fighter he runs into gets damaged and poisoned. Finally, Subspace's finisher, Noxious Void, spawns a crystal that acts like a vacuum, sucking in nearby enemy fighters and applying poison and vulnerability to them before exploding and dealing damage. The vulnerability is based on how long the fighter has been in the finisher, and the pull radius is 20 studs. Also, the finisher gets cancelled if Subspace dies during it. Well, that's honestly not a lot to go over since Subspace's kit is actually pretty simple to understand. And in fact, the simplicity of it really makes Subspace stand out as a character. His passive is incredibly boring, but it really does its job. It gives Subspace an incentive to help out against enemies since he gains self-sustain from getting tons of assists and kills, especially for a fighter who lacks a regenerative shield to fall back on. Combine this with potential healers on a team, and Subspace could somewhat manage himself despite being very reliant on assists. His M1 is pretty simple to understand. Traps aren't too big of a priority on most maps to use, as while they can cover routes or rollout spots or spammy choke points, they are usually inconsistent based on what fighter you're up against. Directs, while less powerful, do allow Subspace to immediately apply pressure to targets by stacking vulnerability and poison on enemies to instantly make them more squishy, especially tanky ones like Katana and Banhammer. M2 is a move that exists, honestly. The damage and recast are good damage, and the vulnerability and slow it applies is great. It's surprisingly decent as an escape tool when out close in situations, as it can disorient the person chasing you, which is huge for Subspace. I really don't know what else to add for this move. It's generally just a way to annoy targets more. Yeah, that's about it, honestly. Q is just stupidly good. The crystal is surprisingly fast and easy to land, and the area it takes up is amazing. The gas cloud is great for locking down narrow passages, predicting movements, or simply just making tanky and slower fighters much easier to take down as a result due to how fast it applies vulnerability. E is just exactly what Subspace needs, a rollout and escape tool. Using this move basically gives Subspace a free way to get out of sketchy situations, rolling out, or just repositioning yourself better thanks to the increased speed. While the cooldown can be pretty strict on when you can use it, it allows Subspace versatility in many situations and helps him play with his team better and avoiding unnecessary risks. Oh yeah, and it does damage, I completely forgot about that, and yeah, it does damage, I guess. The finisher is an absolute game changer of a move for better and for worse. On one hand, it can absolutely screw fighters or whole teams over thanks to its area effect and vacuum-like nature, and on the other hand, it does pretty much nothing. This finisher is mainly based on if enemies are around a point that could easily be trapped or simply applying pressure and locking off pathways. It's extremely powerful due to this nature, but it can obviously lack on a lot of maps, either due to it being too open or simply not having much spaces where you can utilize its effectiveness due to its low pull range. However, it is undoubtedly one of the scariest moves to face, and the way it can change tides in games with proper setup and team players is beautiful. You might have realized that I don't really have a lot to talk about when it comes to Subspace, and honestly you're right, because there really isn't much to dissect here. He applies poison and vulnerability and slow sometimes, he controls big areas of maps, he can be a literal annoyance, he can make enemies have a hell of a time against his team. He really has a simple role and incredibly simple moves. What you see is what you get, and Subspace is no different. Vulnerability is truly an amazing tool to have, especially when many bulky fighters and healers are high value targets that Subspace can surprisingly do insanely well against. Even targets like Hyperlaser are easy to chip down due to how slow he is and how hard it is to get Subspace off of him. And really, he is simply fun in that manner. There's nothing complex about him, and hearing the damage ticks and having an overall high area of denial is satisfying to me. He is simply a somewhat easy character to pick up, and his role is pretty easy to understand and adapt with a team with. he can mesh insanely well with pretty much any fighter, as every single fighter appreciates the vulnerability and extra chip damage Subspace provides, and since assists grant him self-sustain, both people profit off of it and Subspace can continue doing his game plan. To be fair, Subspace struggles long range as his M1s have a set distance and trying to use his kit in a long range scenario is fairly awkward, obvious, and inconsistent. But that's fine since Subspace excels mid-range against basically everyone. He can easily hit directs, slow targets get overrun by vulnerability, fast targets don't want to take avoidable chip, and healers, god forbid, they become easier to kill than they already are, especially Vinestaff, who has practically no mobility options to escape with and can't cleanse herself. Subspace pretty much makes everything for his team much easier at mid-range and can especially help with big bulky threats that are pretty popular to use in this game. Now, I talked about long range and mid-range, but you might ask, how is Subspace close range? And the answer, pretty terrible. Subspace is more prone to self-damaging himself, and any fighter that can rush anyone down close up can pretty much rush down Subspace every time. Every melee close up could kill him, any ranged close up could kill him, hell, even Boombox pretty much makes him near useless due to that damn shield. Subspace does have two ways of escaping though, either recasting his M2 to find a way to make space or using his E. Unfortunately, using M2 is inconsistent as some maps won't offer easy ways to avoid fires with the recast or damage, and the E's cooldown lasts longer than YouTuber apologies, so it'll most likely not be up a lot of the time. Oh, and fighters like Sling and Shuriken can also bully Subspace. While Shuriken is prone to being worn down, especially due to his glass cannon bulk, Slingshot can just maneuver everywhere while others like Scythe can simply mix up movement or just completely outdamage Subspace in every way and can chase him effectively. And because of his poor mobility outside E, Subspace struggles to juke or even get away from faster threats. So it's safe to say, Subspace struggles incredibly close range and needs to keep his distance so he avoids awful interactions like this. And guess how he keeps distance? I'll give you a moment to figure it out because, you know, he is a support fighter. Yeah, you have to rely on your team for that. Subspace uses his kit to bolster his team's offenses, allowing them to go for harder pushes and take ground against the enemy. Not only that, their offenses help Subspace keep healthy against chip damage or any fighter who really wants to 1v1 him due to his lackluster moves up close and allow him to have longevity. Subspace could also use his teammates to help him close range as he could blend in with the back or front line well and reposition if needed. Of course, the problem is that you need to rely on your team. This is something I touched on many times before, so I'll keep it short and say this. Teams are unreliable, but considering we are playing a support like Subspace, we simply need to play at our best to help our team out like a team player. However, unlike supports like Vinestaff and MEDKIT, Subspace fits on pretty much anything. Tanks love tearing down other bulky fighters with Subspace's help, range fighters appreciate easier times carrying down targets with their high damage burst options, and supporters just appreciate damage in general, especially Boombox. Aggressive fighters like Bio and Skate absolutely love being able to completely nuke targets with vulnerability on them, especially Hyperlaser and healers who struggle often against them. And of course, Noxious Void is stupidly amazing if you get the right positioning. Subspace, due to his role, is splashable. He can fit on pretty much most comps and have a sufficient role in weakening the enemy. This is really what makes him so fun. Not only is he simply fun to use and move around with, but the fact you can use him in pretty much most scenarios and get value out of him as long as your team follows through and can play to your strengths. So that splashable nature does come with the price of making goddamn sure that your team isn't just bad. There should be more to talk about. Well, his skins are cool. Look, Subspace just sometimes has nothing to talk about. He doesn't have a complex thing anywhere, he simply stays mid-range and pesters the enemy team with damage over time and that sweet vulnerability. I genuinely really want to talk more about him, but no, he is so simple in every single way that it's honestly kind of boring. Obviously that doesn't mean that he isn't fun. I find him tons of fun simply due to his role, simple playstyle, and just overall very neat kit that just makes the enemy team more or less hate you. You aren't securing a lot of kills, you aren't in the enemy's face, you aren't camping from long range, you just have the most plain and simple plan and kit imaginable that has many things that basically do the same thing. And honestly, I love it. I can't really describe more without repeating everything I just said, so what I can end this off with is by saying that you should try out Subspace. He is simple and easy to learn with skills that are pretty fun to use and such. If you're trying to get into the game as a whole, he could be a character to try out, especially when it comes to the pretty intimidating support roster, as he is by far the most simple and approachable character of the bunch, with fair weaknesses and fair strengths.
Disclaimer! Pretty much all the voiceover on this video is done with me being sick. I ate the sushi and I immediately got really bad sickness, and I am still sick. So, blame the sushi, I guess. Yeah, that's all I needed to say. Enjoy the video, I guess. Okay, that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching. What? Really? Alright. Alright, fine. I will actually talk about Katana in some meaningful way. Hopefully. Katana is a melee character who operates as one of the two tank characters in Phighting, as shown by his incredibly big health pool and shield of 200 and 300 respectively. Unlike the other tank Banhammer, Katana focuses more on sustainability in the long run and acts more like an actual tank character who can take hits and help out both offensively and defensively. I'm gonna be honest, Katana really doesn't deserve a full kit overview because I am expecting people to know what his moves kinda do in some capacity, but just for some refreshing, I will quickly go through all of his moves because unfortunately, there isn't much to go over. Katana's passive, Looming Misfortune, makes it that every time Katana hits someone with his M1, a mark will apply for every hit. When a target reaches 5 marks, the marks explode doing 8 damage per stack and gives Katana 10 shield per stack, with some slow as well depending on the stacks. Katana's M1, Calamity Slice, allows Katana to do a 5-hit combo while holding down M1, slightly moving Katana in the air and allowing him to stay in the air if he is there while doing the move. Every slash does 24 damage with a 0.5 fire rate. The range of the slashes is also insanely massive, and applies a slow and bound to Katana for consistency reasons, I guess? I don't know, but it's there. Katana's M2, Spirit Cleanse, slashes the enemy for 30 damage, applies a Mark of Misfortune onto the enemy, and also procs any existing marks on the enemy. This slash also refreshes Katana's M1 combo, which can allow for another M1 combo to follow up on the M2, which can further bolster some air stalling. We'll get to that. Sort of. Katana's Q, Thread Toe, throws a rope. If the rope connects with an enemy, it does 30 damage and applies grounded to the person pulled for 1.5 seconds, and stuns them based on how far they were grappled with a base timer of a second. The move also has a range of 150 studs and doesn't act like a hit scan projectile, so keep that in mind. Katana's E, Foul Counter, is a move that puts Katana into a countering stance, which negates most damage and knockback. Every 20 damage Katana takes in his stance, he will launch a slash that applies a mark of Looming Misfortune and 14 damage per 20 damage he takes in his stance at a maximum of 80 damage. If Katana takes more than 100 from a single attack, Katana would not block any of the damage of that move, and the ability also doesn't get negated by stuns, so watch for that too. Katana's finisher, Soul Splicer, slices a large area around Katana after a 1.75 second windup, which applies 5 misfortune marks on anyone hit by the slash. The damage is... what the hell is this? The damage is based on the average health of all enemies hit, added by a base amount of 80, which sounds really stupid and I never knew this until now, so thanks Katana. Okay, so Katana is very simple as a character, and honestly, yeah, he is pretty damn easy to pick up and understand. His passive is pretty much the main element of him that keeps him alive and allows him to have that long self-sustaining shield. It strictly ties into his M1, so we'll get to that, but the passive allows him to slow down enemies, get shield from enemies, and do extra damage to enemies. I'm saying enemies a lot, Jesus. His M1, however, what the hell is this move? This move has an ungodly range, lasts for a 5-hit combo, applies Misfortune for every hit, which procs a full stack of Misfortune if you hit all 5 M1s, allows for air stalling, which makes hitting him harder, and also has slight push force if you're trying to run away. This move is absolutely stupid to try and hit or even see because the slash is absurdly huge. You can honestly just hit people from insane distances and make some melee characters cry due to the fact that Katana can just hit them while they usually can't. The M2 just makes this look even more stupid. The M2 can proc existing marks of Misfortune, which can make escaping Katana even harder, and make Katana get a quick burst of shield if he didn't activate marks already. What makes this move insane, however, is the fact that it refreshes his M1 combo even in midair, which allows for Katana to keep air stalling and get even more damage while in the air. I don't think I need to explain why this is incredibly annoying for most characters, but combined with the proc Misfortune stacks, it can make Katana prey onto anyone if they are just slightly in his range. This ability is just so dang useful for Katana's entire game plan and allows him to have access to so much more options. Katana's Q is, okay, this one is a little weird. So, the grapple, depending on the range, can be pretty awkward to hit. For one, it has a delay when you fire it, so it's not like an instant release. And two, the grapple has some sort of travel time, so it's a bit of a timing as it acts like a projectile. Sometimes the grapple hits in really awkward ways, and other times the grapple hitbox makes no sense, and other times it blesses you. If you miss a grapple, well, too bad. If you hit a grapple though, the character is most likely dead if your team follows up. Due to the grounded and stun, pretty much any character that isn't a tank will be absolutely murdered by Katana and his team due to the time that he can't use anything, which is what makes this tool so good. Oh yeah, and close range, it can just pull and stun anyone pretty easily, which helps in a lot of battles. Specifically the Katana mirror match, which is obscenely boring, but hey, it helps out there. Katana's E, however, yeah, this move is an open's worst nightmare. With E, you can basically negate most damage sources and absolutely wipe people with it. While some finishers like Sword don't get their damage negated, being able to sponge damage for free and throw it back at enemies is a big boost to not only Katana's defense, but also offense. Granted, some could try to potentially bait out the counter, but a counterplay to that is to, well, not get baited. I know, it's a crazy concept. This E can be central for many specific situations as well. It can completely mirror Scythe using her gun finisher, it can make sling finisher shots an absolute hazard for your team, you can bait Biograft onto you and murder them if they aren't paying attention. There is so much you can do with it. The only real downside is that it can stop your air stall, but that's not much of a downside for its upsides. This move is genuinely the best thing Katana has, especially for the value it can muster up, and even at its worst, it can still reward some value due to the armor it gives Katana. Now, you might think after all I have said and praised about Katana's kit, you might think the finisher is game changing. I mean, it's fine. It usually does a lot of damage, the wind up is forgiving with Katana's bulk, and the marks on hit can be a blessing for Katana's bulk, but compared to many of the other broken as hell finishers that can change games way too much, it's pretty fair, honestly. The hitbox can be a bit stupid vertically, but it's pretty fair and gives good value, especially on Conquer, as it can usually cover most of the points. Just don't die when using it and you'll somehow get some value out of it. So, if you have been paying attention to the gameplay on the screen, Katana might seem very easy because, well, he actually is easy. I will probably say when it comes to the fighters, he might be the easiest, along with fighters like Slingshot and Subspace. Katana's game plan is fairly one note, and his passive allows him to fill into that one note playstyle. Approach the enemy, do big damage, get shield for big damage, and stay alive. And it doesn't need too much input to even do it, it's usually finding a high spot and air stalling while using M1 and M2 and maybe doing an occasional Q and E for better damage and stuff. Katana is often seen as a brainless character, which in opens he kinda is. Unless you're playing Annihilate, Katana is very brainless in an open server, as the players usually don't have the tools or characters needed that can actually take on a Katana. Sometimes they try to one-on-one Katana even if they usually lose the battle most of the time, and yeah, that's about it. On Andy, he might need to use cover and his allies, but just like opens, anything can work in opens. And that's about all I can say. I wish there was more, but no, that's actually it. I could talk about his competitive scrim stuff, but the video would be way too long if I went into it, so yeah. Did I mention his character has nothing to it? Like, he is so dead simple that I don't even know how to make a video on him without it feeling so redundant. He is Katana. He is so self-explanatory. He stomps open servers unless there is one semi-competent player on the other team. I don't really know how else to explain it. His character just has no meat on him to dissect, it's all bones. I mean, his skins are cool, so I'll give it that, and yeah, Katana is brainless fun. I have no idea how to end the video now. Okay, let me say this then. Katana is a fine character. He is balanced and sometimes boring and sometimes fun. It really depends, but Katana is fine. He is redundant and weird, but he is fine. Okay, how the hell do I transition to an ending screen?